Hey folks, I am Troy and you're watching TroyTube. A lot of folks have asked if we're going to carry DTF powder and film and other supplies, and we're probably not, and we'll be back in a minute to talk about that. So first, what is DTF? DTF is direct to film printing. You can compare this probably to getting plastisol transfer screen printed. So if you go to somewhere like F&M Expressions, if you had, say, 300 shirts to make, they were full color designs, instead of cutting and weeding all that HTV or trying to find some other way to do it, you can go to somewhere like F&M Expressions, you pay a small setup fee, and then you pay a small price per transfer. It's a great way to get multiple transfers fairly quickly, with much less expense than you would have probably in the HTV itself for that many shirts, not to mention not having to weed it or anything. They're pretty soft, thin transfers you apply, and like I said, they can be in full color just like a screen printed shirt can be. So DTF is basically, in my opinion, a way to do a one-off transfer. You literally print it onto the film. You can print one logo, or you can print large, multiple different logos on one sheet, or one big design, however you want to do it. And the way this works is the printer has a special ink in it. It also has a true DTF printer will also have white ink. So when it prints on the film, it will print your design basically backwards from the front up, since it's going to be the front of the transfer is basically against the film, so that when you apply it and peel it off, that's what's exposed. And then on the back of it, it puts a layer of white ink for opacity. So just like screen print, when they screen print on a dark garment or a non-white garment, the first thing they do is they put down a layer of white so that they put the colors down on top of it, and it shows nice and bright. That's the problem. That's why you can't sublimate onto a dark garment without an underlayment or something there, because the ink just goes onto the dark garment and it doesn't show, or it changes the color of the ink because the color shows through it. It's basically translucent. So a true DTF setup, the film goes through the printer, it prints the design, and then it feeds into what's called a shaker, and it sprinkles this powder on it. This powder, I have a little bag of it here I got from Amazon, and to experiment with and look at. So it sprinkles this powder on it while the ink is wet, so that powder sticks to the ink. It gets all over the film, and then it feeds through an oven basically to dry the ink and kind of melt this powder onto the ink. And then when it comes out the other side, you brush off the excess powder from the film, and you have a ready to press transfer. So it's quite a setup. I mean, to get started in DTF printing, I think most full setups are, $7,000 or $8,000. A lot of them are $10,000, $12,000. So to get a true DTF printer setup for the average crafter, it's just not feasible. I kind of compare it to DTG printers, direct to garment printers, where you put the t-shirt directly in the printer. Those things have been around for, 12 or 15 years. The price still isn't affordable for an average crafter. So I just don't think for the average person, DTF is going to be that great. If you have a store or you have enough volume to justify the price of that item, that's a different story. Now, the other side of DTF that concerns me is, what are the dangers of it? A lot of people went out and went fully in on epoxy a few years ago, started doing tumblers with epoxy. They learned that they could use countertop epoxy, which that typically doesn't have an odor to it. And then they learned that even though there's no odor, it still has fumes. It still has to off gas and cure, and it does that by releasing these gases. So a lot of people learned that they still had allergic reactions to it. It needed to be used in a ventilated place. There are some people out there that posted pictures of some pretty good allergic reactions they had to it. So DTF is kind of new, and people are excited. People are buying this powder off Amazon. They're playing with it at home. They're doing the sublimation hack, which I think is a true hack. I don't really condone that. I think it's very difficult to do for most people. I think it's a real pain. That's just my opinion. A lot of the film won't feed through the printers properly. You got to tape it to a sheet of paper, try to fool the printer. There's a lot of experimenting you have to do to really get it right, and then you still don't have opacity. Basically, they're printing on the film with sublimation ink and putting the powder on it, laying it under their heat press for a minute or so, whatever that time and temperature is, to melt that adhesive and brushing it off, and then they can press it on a garment. It does look okay. It comes out a little bit of a rubbery feel, like the plastisol transfers. It's really it feels pretty nice actually, but it's just pain in the butt in my opinion. I just don't think it's something I'll ever do. I like to play around with that stuff and understand it, but don't really want to do that. The other side of it, I wondered about this powder. So did a little bit of research, and it seems that the powder, this powder is very fine. It's not quite as fine as like baby powder, but it's pretty fine. So when you do things with it, the finer particles, it kind of aerosolizes, and you can inhale that powder. Even though you can't see it, there's still a lot of really, really fine particles there that, like I said, when you do things with it, it aerosolizes and gets in the air and you're breathing it. So first of all, if you're doing this stuff, I'd recommend a respirator, not just a mask, but definitely probably a full respirator, because when you're breathing powder, that can have a profound effect on your respiratory system. The talcum powder lawsuit for Johnson & Johnson, that whole thing was about the talcum powder being contaminated with asbestos and it causing ovarian cancer and mesothelioma or mesothelioma, I think it's mesothelioma. And the only thing I think that causes mesothelioma is asbestos. So people were using talcum powder and breathing in that aerosolization, if I can say that, in powder form, and gets in their lungs, and they end up with mesothelioma. So same thing that everybody, all these asbestos suits were about. So I started doing a little research on it, and it seems that a lot of the manufacturers state that DTF powder in its dry form can produce MDI vapors. MDI vapors are classified by like OSHA and CDC as they can affect the respiratory system. So I started to just really think about this, and sure enough, when I look at it, this stuff is really, really fine particles, very, very fine particulates. And if you're working with it, it's going to be in the air around you. It's going to get on your hands. I don't think there's any danger of touching it or handling it or anything like that. It doesn't absorb into the skin, but it's the aerosolization and the inhalation of it that is a potential issue. So I hope these companies that are doing this as a business have their employees wearing respirators and have it in a ventilated environment and maybe secluded, things like that, to protect their employees, because this stuff, it's fairly new. We don't know what's going to come 5, 10, 15 years from now, after people have been around this stuff, using it and handling it and breathing it day after day after day. And once it gets into into the air, and until it goes into a ventilation system and gets filtered out or something, it's going to be there, I think. So I don't know what the risks are. I haven't found anything to say, yeah, this is a deadly compound, but what I know is it's basically resin that's ground up into a fine powder, like polyurethane type resin. And if you inhale that, it can be bad for your respiratory system. Inhaling any powders can be bad for your respiratory system, even if it's just fine sawdust or whatever it is, organic compounds, whatever it is. If you're inhaling powder, it's going to be bad for your respiratory system. Resin, you're talking about inhaling resin powder and getting it in your lungs. So what's that really do to you? I don't know. I don't know that anybody really knows, but I do know that if I was doing that as a business, I would have my employees wearing respirators and have it in a closed environment. If I was doing it at home, I would definitely have it in a closed environment and be wearing a respirator. I just don't think that what you get out of it, unless you're going to spend the money on a full, nice, professional DTF system, I don't think that it's something that the average person should be messing with. These are my opinions. Obviously, I'm not a doctor. play one on TV? No, I don't. But you know, those are concerns that I have with DTF. So take that for what you will. But those are the reasons we probably will never carry DTF powder or supplies. And it's just a final note. I talk a lot about things that you buy from Amazon that come from China and some of these other countries, like ink and anything that's chemical based. You know, we worked with someone one time that was trying to sell some mica powder from China, and we talked to someone who was very knowledgeable about it, and they said that this was basically, it was like makeup grade mica powder. And this guy said no. He said they all lie about it. And so when it comes to anything that involves chemicals in China, my fear is the quality control just isn't there. China doesn't care about their people, their employees. They don't protect them. You know, this stuff it's hard to tell how it's made or what's in it. It hasn't been lab tested. You know, those kind of things. Those are just my observations on it. You know, I've dealt with a lot of stuff that comes from China and some of the other countries, and I know what some of those risks are and what happens or what doesn't happen there. So just wanted to give you my thoughts on that. So we probably will not carry any DTF powder or supplies or anything like that. And I think it's just early and hasn't probably revealed what kind of problems people may have with their lungs a few years from now after working with that powder every day and handling it every day and stirring up those particulates and inhaling them. So if you have any questions or comments, post them down below the video.